All right, everyone, we are recording, and as soon as we have quorum, we will actually start the meeting. I believe Councilmember Swarthout is attempting to get online now, so
having difficulty getting on.
all right, I see we have Councilmember Swarthout joining us. So with that, I will go ahead and call the Friday, February 28th, 2025 Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. So with that, we can dispense with roll call. We're all here except for Councilmember Althauser, who is actually excused today. So,
Okay.
all right. So the first item is approval of the Budget and Finance Committee minutes from August 21st, 2024 and January 24th, 2025. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
All right. Do I have a second? I think I can second that. So I will second. I see that Councilmember Swarthout is still trying to get connected here. So with that, I'll go ahead and take the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And it looks like Councilmember Swarthout is still having technical difficulties. So with that, we have a majority and we will move forward and I'll check with her. Why don't we move into the year-to-date budget update from the Finance Department, and Administrator Parks, are you going to start that or is Troy going to start?
No, I was going to have Troy go ahead and start. I'm just anticipating potentially having some conversation as well. So.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us at lunchtime on a Friday. Very dedicated of everybody. I'm going to share my screen. And can everybody see an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I don't have a super formal presentation. There's no PowerPoint slides. I just thought we'd walk through some of the budget to actual numbers. And there's a lot of context we need to provide along the way, which is why I'm just going to talk through it. And I'll say before we get started, we will be working in the finance department on what I would call a better method of presenting this information to you. I think this turned out okay. And let me make it a little bigger also in case that helps. But this was a pretty labor-intensive report to put together, and we want to make that a little more automated if we can. So we got some ideas to do that. But so we start actually on this tab here that has the nice colors, and this is the detail tab that has all of our revenues and all of our expenses for the entire city, and there's more than 2,000 individual line items here, which is why we have the other tabs to summarize them. But I'm going to start with this one just to show you kind of what I did and what I mean by taking context to these numbers, because it's the end of February, so we're very new into the biennium, and in the system, although we have a biennial budget, our system doesn't play nice with a biennial budget. So we actually have it in the system as two one-year budgets, and then we kind of finesse those together. So this will be for 2025, where we are year to date. And what I want to point out here, we'll start off with the revenues, and this first green line here that I'm highlighting is property taxes. So our budget for property taxes in the general fund is a little over $10 million. But year to date, we're only showing $38,000 in there. So that, if just at a glance, might look like a big problem, but it's really not. So the context around this is that property taxes are due in April and November. And so we have big chunks of time where there's very little property tax money coming in. Some people will pay early. Some people, you can choose to pay monthly. There's lots of options, but and the money comes to us as the county collects it. But we don't get 5 million. It doesn't come in equal chunks. It comes in primarily in 2 months, spread in November and April. So what I did here property tax is very stable, and it's more predictable than other forms of revenue. And so what I did here to kind of normalize that in this column J, I just divided 12 by 2 months and put 1.6 million in there. And so that that'll give you a truer picture of where we're at, because when you first look at revenue, scroll down here, we're 16.7% of the way through the year. That's the first 2 months. But when you look at this, like the miscellaneous revenue is only showing 3.6% collected. So again, without the context, that looks really bad. And so we need to kind of add that context in so that we understand what's truly going on, so that we don't all give ourselves a heart attack. So that's what we did with revenue there. And we'll come over to this summary tab, which shows the property tax. We show budget of over 10 million, the actual prorated at 1.6 million, which puts us at a year-to-date percentage of 16.28, which is very close to the 16.67 that we would consider ideal. We did similar for sales tax. Now, sales tax is less predictable than property tax. There's more ups and downs, but there's always for sales tax and other state collected taxes, there's always a lag time when it comes to these things. And so we have received some sales tax for January, which is usually one of our lowest months for property tax collections, because we're coming off of the holidays, and people just don't tend to buy as much in January and February on the retail level. So we've prorated that one a little bit too. And because here we are at the end of February, but we haven't received February sales tax yet. We will receive February sales tax. We'll receive some of that probably later today from the county. They usually give it to us right on the last day of the month. But also because of the way businesses collect sales tax and then they take time to reconcile everything and report to the state, there's often a lag time. So we'll receive more property tax for February in March and probably even a little bit in April. So these things aren't, so our system is pulling data in real time for what we have at the moment, but we haven't received everything from the county and the state yet. And so that's kind of why this finessing.
Sorry?
Yes, sir.
So I understand the explanation for property tax and how and the way it tends to break down, but for sales tax that you're getting into, for the 2025 11 point something million that you have in there, is that historical? Is that based upon what we've seen historical?
That is the projected sales tax for the budget for this year.
So now, what was the historic? So what do you have any? You have an idea what was in 2024 or 2023? Actually,
I do. I don't have that up in front of me, but I can certainly get that for you, and we can certainly provide that to you for context.
okay. So the reason why I'm asking this question is, well, we know that property tax is certain, but sales tax is not certain. There are a lot of variability. Yet the amount that is proposed or anticipated is way more than property tax. So my other questions would be, what happens in the event that we don't collect that much based upon all of the layoffs that we've been hearing? So if you see where I'm going with my question is that if I was a business person, what I made last year is not what I think I would make this year, given what is going to happen nationally with all the layoffs. So how does that square with this scenario?
Sure. Yeah, I believe I understand what you're asking, where you're going with your question, and so I'll give you my thoughts on that, and then just let me know if you have any follow-ups. So when we do the projections for the sales tax and other numbers for our revenue, we do look at the historical data for that, and so we look what the trend has been the last several years, and that helps inform where we think we're going to go for the next biennium. And so that's a piece of it, but of course we keep in mind also, do we expect the economy to keep going strong? Do we expect a recession? Do we expect it to flatten out? We kind of build in some assumptions to that. And so part of the reason for this presentation, and you'll get these regularly for the Budget and Finance Committee, we keep a really close eye on especially sales tax because it's such a big revenue source for us and it can be volatile. So if we have a recession, we may not meet our sales tax projection. We could fall short. So we're going to keep a really close eye on that as we go through the year. And if we start seeing trends that we're not collecting as much as we thought we would, that gives us an opportunity to make some adjustments potentially.
I'm going to jump in here too. That's what I was going to convey as well. So if it does not, sales tax and B&O tax, all of these are generally projections, but some are more stable than others. And Troy has a very complicated and extensive projection spreadsheet and has identified a whole series of factors. And if you like spreadsheets, you can certainly set up a time with him to go over that. To take a look at it. And it does take into consideration, several years in the past, as well as, larger, both statewide as well as national, as well as, global sort of economic trends in terms of making those projections. If we see that we're falling short, we will tighten our belt. So we will not spend more than what we have the ability to spend. So when we adopt the budget, it's budget authority. But that doesn't mean that we're gonna be spending every single dollar that's been identified in that budget. We're gonna have to, we are going to watch on a monthly basis where we are, particularly given this current atmosphere of, in uncertainty, particularly with regard to the economy. We will definitely keep a tight look on things and pull in the reins if we need to.
Yeah, and I'll just add again to that, to build on what Lisa said about the current political environment, I'd maybe say, but I don't, this isn't the place to make political comments, but certainly the president's political agenda, if it goes through on certain key things, some of those proposed policies are very inflational in nature. And that's not a political statement. That's purely an economic statement. 25% tariffs are going to cause inflation. That's just a fact. Deporting workers in construction and trades and hospitality is going to cause inflation. Those are just facts. And so that's another thing we keep a really close eye on to see what happens with those. There's a lot of uncertainty right now around those kind of things. And so that's another thing that we'll be keeping an eye on to see, because those things, if they're passed and if they kick in and that inflation does happen, that can have a direct effect on the economy and on sales tax. And so those, we'll be keeping a very close eye on that as we go through the year. I see, we're going to say something, council member?
I think you probably already covered it. I'm sensing the same sense of nervousness that we've made a commitment for hiring, adding to our staff and everything, and just was looking forward to a positive year. And so I'm just, concerned how that we'll be able to continue to move forward and achieve these goals that we set for ourselves. So just echoing what Councilmember Agabi, just nervous as well. So.
Well, and I just might add, this is another reason why we're doing these monthly, is because, we can keep track of everything on a more ongoing basis as opposed to, as needed. So that's why these meetings are monthly.
So I'd like to wrap up by asking Troy, or whomever I can answer the question. The state has called for reduction of FTEs, and Councilmember oh, my brain, too many medication. Aline had just mentioned the FTE that we anticipated that we were going to be adding this year. Do we anticipate that we are going to have at least a backup plan of FTE reduction in the event that things are going south?
I would say a backup plan. So first of all, the state budget is very, very different than our budget. So in one case, some people would argue there's more staff than what you need. And we definitely are in a position where we don't have enough staff to do the work that we are required to do. And of the positions that we added, there are identified funding sources outside of the general fund, which, sales tax and B&O tax and property tax, the utility tax that we raise, those are all sources for the general fund. So of the 33 positions that we identified as new positions, we have only about 6 or 7 of those that are actually slated to come out of the general fund. And secondarily, we've got existing vacancies within our existing approved positions and FTEs, just by virtue of changeover. And as you might recall, in the conversation during the budget adoption process, a question was asked, well, how much was our salary savings in 2024 from having open positions? And the answer was, I believe it was 2.5 million, something like that. So by virtue of a lot of turnover, and vacant positions, we realize, you know, the salaries that we ask for, for approval in the budget are really a truly maximum condition, assuming every position is filled for the entirety of the time, you know, the entirety of the budget years, the entirety of the new timeline, if they're a new position that's added, you know, somewhere through the biennium, those are maximum conditions. So we already have it's a very conservative estimate, particularly when it comes to salaries and benefits in terms of whether or not we need to tighten our belt, you know, and we are a public service agency and our primary costs are personnel, salaries, wages, and benefits. So we're going to do everything we can to save money if needed in things that are other than any type of reduction of FTEs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question also. So for the general fund, going through these and adding some of that context and prorating some of these amounts, we're looking pretty good so far. I've made some notes here if things were prorated, like we talked about with the property tax and sales tax. Another interesting one when you do these kind of things and really get into these details, sometimes you find things that make you ask a bunch of questions. That happened with building permit revenue when I started going through this, and what I found was you'll recall discussion from, I think it was late 2024, where the Secretary of State applied for a building permit in the city of Tumwater, and it was nearly $1 million building permit. We have issued a refund for 80% of that permit, and so when you get into the community development portion of the budget, or what we have here is as building permits, you have a whole about $759,000 worth of negative revenue, which really makes things look weird and it throws the budget off. And so when you dig into that and find out what it is, that's just another area to add context. And so building permits and community development department is on track as far as revenue goes. We just have that very unusual refund in there, and we're actually going to that got processed in 2025. Our books are still open for 2024 because we still have bills coming in from 2024. So we're actually going to accrue that back to 2024, and that way we're meeting the matching principle that we talked about a while back in a budget workshop, where the building permit was issued in 2020. Sorry, my mouth isn't working. Building permit was issued in 2024. So we're going to accrue that refund back to 2024 so that it offsets in the same year instead of making 2025 look really bad. So that was a nice find going through this. Most of our revenue is pretty much on track. And then we come down here to the expenditures in the general fund. This is, I didn't have time to go through and prorate too much of this. It is showing a little low, which is not a bad thing. As Lisa mentioned, some of that is salary savings. But some of that is also, we're on the last day of the pay period for February. And so the last 2 weeks, salaries and benefits, just salaries for staff haven't been paid yet. So that doesn't show up in this report. So expenditures are pretty much on track. Also, even if we were to add those extra salaries in, we're still a little bit below expectations. So that's a good thing. And the reason I backed off when I started saying benefits is we actually pay benefits at the beginning of the month. So all the benefits are included in these numbers. Now, if we switch over to the next tab, and I'll blow this up. We get into the proprietary or business type funds. And so these are the utilities and the golf fund. These, again, will need a little bit of context. You can see here, we'll start with water. And we've got the budget amount for the total revenue, and expenses, actual revenues and expenses, what's left to both collect and spend, and again, 16.67% through the year through the end of February, but we've only spent 1.78, or excuse me, only collected 1.78% of the revenue and only spent 1.73%. So something's clearly not accounted for there, and what it really is $25 million in capital construction costs that are budgeted for the water fund for both the maintenance and operation facility and for the water storage tank projects. But we haven't moved forward on those projects yet. So that money, both the revenue and expense, are sitting there in the budget, but we haven't collected, we haven't issued debt yet for the revenue, and we haven't spent the money yet. So that's why that percentage is so low, and that will continue to be very low until we get to the point where we're actually starting to construct those projects. That's a similar story for sewer and storm, not quite to the degree because water has the bulk of that money for those projects. But there is 2.5 million for that in the sewer utility and 2.5 million in storm. And so that does make a big impact on those numbers as well. And then down here at the bottom for golf, same format, budgeted revenue and expense, actual, what's remaining, and then year to date. Both revenue and expense are below that 16.67%, which is good. And you probably noticed revenues, we have way more in the actual column over here. We've got a lot more expense than we have revenue, and that's because golf is very seasonal. And in February and January, we're not bringing in a whole bunch of revenue at golf. That's really typical. January, February, March are pretty tough months for the golf business. But then as the weather starts to get better, it gets really busy out there, as you know, and the revenue comes rolling in through at least September and maybe into October as if we get good weather. And then it falls off again in those rainy months. So this is not unexpected at all, and probably where I would say where we expect to be for this time of year. So that's
All right, any
that was
questions?
all I had, unless there are additional questions.
All right.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
stop sharing also.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think as we see, moves through the year, this will all, it all evens out. It's always hard to do something with a snapshot in time because there's always something moving in these budgets. So. All right, any questions? All right.
Thank you, Troy. I really thought the explanation that you gave for the golf makes a lot of sense, and I don't know how much we could do about that, but it is what it is. So thank you.
I think that's, hopefully we will figure out different strategies for, making that what it is a better condition, Councilmember Agave. Part of the reason for ensuring that we're doing these reports to you all monthly and to going to the council with a financial report in March, quarterly, probably in March, is so that we can, as we're doing our financial analysis and planning with our consultant, you are becoming much more familiar as council members on a more regular basis of where we actually are at in terms of the different funds and how they're all put together. So we're hoping that it's a transparency tool as well as a tool that we can use to communicate better and to help understand better, all of us, quite frankly, how this very complex financial picture for the city of Tumwater fits all together. and how we can do a better job, or a good job. Well, I'll just say how we can do a good job of being very efficient and effective in stewarding the public's funds.
Any other questions or comments before we move to the next agenda item? All right, with that, we will move to the employment agreements, and City Administrator Parks, are you doing this one?
That's me.
All right,
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. So this is an action that has come to the forefront in large part because, in part because we have a new department director, the Information Technology Department Director. And because we have a series of existing department director employment agreements that have been approved over a series of time. At some point in the past, a decision was made to implement employment contracts for directors, excuse me. There are a variety of these. There are a variety of agreements, and we're looking at this as an opportunity where we need to implement some new agreements. This became an opportunity for us to evaluate and try to standardize the existing department director agreements. So essentially, right now there are 10 directors, department directors at the city of Tumwater. 7 of those currently have employment agreements, and 3 of them, including 2 director positions that have been directors for quite some time, do not. And then our new IT director does not have an employment agreement. So what we've done in reviewing this, I worked with Karen, and we looked at all of the existing employment agreements, and we came up with a template of those agreements. And we are essentially, the request and the proposal is for the council to approve that template. And then that would then give the mayor the authority to enter into those different employment agreements, as you know, it's substantially in the form of the template as we hire new and different directors over time. The intent would be to go back with each of our existing employment agreements, if this template is approved, and replace those, so that again, all of our directors are essentially on the same level playing field in terms of their employment agreements. A couple of the changes in the document that are substantive. So I would point first to the sections related to the terms of the term of the agreement, or the time frame of the agreements. Most of the existing agreements had language that basically set up most of them, I believe, were 3-year terms. So this agreement is approved for 3 years, but it also had a provision that said, but after that 3 years, the provisions of this agreement continue. So the discussion really was, why have an end date if there is, if the provisions of the agreement last beyond that end date. So in this case, what we've proposed is that consistent with, the public sector employment expectations that we all have, employment is at will, and that the agreement is for an indefinite term, but and subject to the different separation or termination provisions that are discussed in the next section. And so then the second substantive topic really is in that separation or termination section. It lays out when and how termination or separation with a person that has an employment agreement would occur, what the different situations or scenarios could be. It talks about if an employee is disabled or is unable to perform their duties, what happens. If there is just the employee chooses to leave of their own volition, how does that work? It makes it very clear that the city can immediately terminate an employee for cause. And it basically defines what cause is. And then It also talks about, the ability to terminate an employment relationship with an employee with an agreement, essentially not for cause and not because of any of the above reasons. But then it also says that in that event, so essentially, from a preference standpoint, if the city no longer wants to have an employee in that director position and wants to terminate their contract, there is a provision that allows that employee to have essentially a severance package. In the case of the existing various employment agreements, that severance package, that timeline that establishes the severance package, it varies anywhere from 2 to 4 to 6 months. The proposal in this template is that severance would be standardized to a period of 6 months. So essentially, if we just decide that Troy no longer is the finance director that the city of Tumwater wants, and he hasn't done anything that can be defined as for cause, we would say, thank you, Troy. We're gonna pay you 6 months of your salary, along with, our typical separation payments of unused leave and that type of thing. And that's the cost essentially of asking somebody to leave when there hasn't been a just cause or a for cause type of situation. Severance packages, severance agreements, severance provisions are typical in an employment contract. All of these existing employment contracts have those. And all we're proposing in this case is that it's standardized. These are high level, highly functioning, very important positions. There's not a lot of them in the area. And when a decision is made to have somebody leave the employment, then that also is that's a big hole that has to be filled. So I think the idea here is to provide the employee some sense of and some measure of safety net if a decision is made is voluntarily made or discretionally made to have that employee leave the employment of the city. But it's also a way in which we can ensure that everybody understands how important these positions are. And so a certain amount of thought goes into a decision being made to let them go if there's no specific cause, right? I want to emphasize this. If there's a reason to fire somebody because they're not doing their job or because they are meeting any of those definitions of cause in the agreement, that can happen and there is no severance. So the severance is a limited situation. And so those are essentially the primary substantive changes. We tried to standardize the rest of the language. Some of the existing agreements, for example, talk about, paying for uniforms and paying for professional development and specific types of certifications that might be provided or required for certain positions. We tried to standardize the agreement as much as possible so that we could, include, the same agreement for Troy could be the same agreement that Brian would have in his role as fire chief, even though Troy doesn't have a uniform and Brian does. So there were a lot of other less consequential types of standardizing language, but that is currently what we're proposing by virtue of this action. And then before I answer any questions, one clarification. In the staff report, if it is a desire of the committee to move this forward to the city council meeting, the staff report currently talks about putting this on the March 4th meeting, which is next Tuesday. That's too soon. We already have the packet of information all put together. So we would suggest if there is a recommended action on the part of the committee, that the agreement template would be placed on the March 18th, 2025 city council meeting. And you'll see in the staff report, we also left it to your discretion whether or not you wanted to put that on the consent or the consideration calendar. Assuming that you would want to likely send this to the consideration agenda so that we can have a conversation with the full council about this proposal and strategy. So I hope I didn't confuse you too much. Karen is on. If you have any questions that for her, but yeah.
Councilmember Swarthout.
So again, just reiterating what this is, what you're putting forward is something that we already have. It's similar to the contracts that we already have with their other ones that you indicated in here. So this just lines us up with what we already have that's existing for our other directors. Okay, all right.
Yes, yeah. And I think, you know, it's very common to have employment agreements for city administrators or city managers and city attorneys. It's not as common to have employment agreements for department directors, but I think that is a benefit that the city of Tumwater evidently in the past chose to extend to department directors. I think it's a really important benefit. And it is one of those things that we can offer where maybe can't offer a great big huge salary comparatively, and makes our positions, our department director positions, hopefully at least equally attractive to have that that extra security of an employment agreement.
Councilmember Gabi.
Lisa, thank you for the presentation. I'm in support of what you said, but I needed about so if a director is wanting in their duties, and then there is a discussion, is that director given the opportunity to make corrections instead of just firing or arbitrarily termination?
So do you mean in the context of entering into the agreement or in terms of?
What I'm saying is, okay, so I do understand. So I do understand the not firing arbitrarily. And I understand that you also said that if in the course of their duty that something was amiss and they could be let go with cause.
Mhm.
So now I'm saying in order for them to be let go with cause, are they given the opportunity to correct that before termination?
Well, that's kind of up to the quite frankly, the mayor. In the case, you know, the mayor and to a certain much lesser extent, the city administrator. You know, if there is if the city determines that there is cause, are you talking about if there's cause?
Well, so okay, so there is cause for job performance only. And how you measure that, I don't know. So I'm trying to gauge, how do we measure that? And if we measure that, how do we say, okay, well, this is what you haven't done. We would like to give you the opportunity to correct that going forward, instead of just saying, well, you haven't met this, and then henceforth you let go.
Can I interject something in here? So Peter, there's a difference of performance issues that you want to work with people with. That's one thing. But this protects directors from doing, you may not be familiar with this situation, but the mayor of Pacific several years ago was elected to be mayor. He started firing directors. He was locking people out of the office. It's a strong mayor form of government. They have the absolute authority to be able to do that. What it did was just tore the city to the ground. I mean, when you're locking your city administrator out of their office and you're firing the chief of police and you're firing all these people who did nothing wrong, but you're just coming in to do that. This provides a level of protection from a situation like that. Not saying that that would happen here, but you know, that brings a amount of security to anyone who's taking a director position.
You and I are speaking from the same page. And
Yeah.
what I'm actually talking about is an added guarantee or surety that you lock me out of my office and then you say, well, you know, I asked for X number of reports 6 months ago. You didn't do anything. And I have no say so to say, well, I did provide the report. Here are the receipts. So that's what I'm talking about. So you are now on the same page.
Yeah, and so, yeah, for cause is one thing. This is just if you just want to start getting rid of people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Councilmember Swarthout?
So as far as moving this ahead, we're discussing and putting it on the agenda for the March 18th meeting. I think it might be something that the council would be interested in hearing about as far as putting it on consideration and just getting, just being transparent, just, bringing them up to speed as well. So this is quite a, not a huge change, but just something I think they should be aware of as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's what I had assumed, but I didn't want to make, determine that for your behalf. And I think, the other clarification here is, the mayor has the authority, in the case of, the majority of the positions, the director positions, to make the decision about hiring and firing. The council authority, in this case, it comes into play specifically for department directors because there's an employment contract. So the council's authority, the way it gets inserted into this, what is typically an administrative hiring and firing process, is because we're establishing a contract. There are 3 positions that require confirmation. So we're not doing anything with regard to the confirmation by council. And that's my position, Karen's position, and Troy's. So in the code itself, it says those 3 positions specifically have to be confirmed by the city council. We're not doing anything with the confirmation. We're just talking about the employment agreements. And we're doing something similar to what we have set up already in other contractual types of situations where council has approved the template. And by virtue of approval of the template, delegated the authority to mayor to put those into place. So just a point of clarification that really what we're asking for here is for the council to say, yes, we believe this is an appropriate employment agreement template, and authorizing the mayor to then enter into those template agreements, the agreement specifically. And in this case, we would, with the 3 directors that don't have anything, which are Parks and Rec, Community Development, and IT, and to enter into new agreements with the 7 directors who currently have those, which are basically everybody except for me. My contract is unaffected by this at this point in time.
I think we should move it forward then.
Right, we'll have it on the second council meeting in March. So,
Yeah,
under considerations.
and I'm gonna channel Karen here because I know she's not feeling 100%, but we could certainly would really like to have an actual recommended action on this one.
Oh, do we have a recommended to approve this?
Yeah, there's if I could read it for you, somebody could, as corrected for the date, and this is right out of your staff report. The recommended action is to place the department director employment agreement template on the March 18, 2025 city council consideration calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign employment agreements with current and future directors in substantially similar form consistent with adopted city policies as approved by the city attorney.
So move.
I'll second.
Great. Okay, it's been moved to second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, it will be put on there with the recommendation. So thank you very much. Oh, we might get out of here early. Any additional items?
I don't think we have anything additional, Mayor, from our perspective at staff level.
Great. And I think, I just want to add, I think that these monthly meetings will be very, very beneficial and will help us, you know, because there's going to be a bit of a learning curve, especially with the budget, budget updates, because everything when it comes to money and billing and all that other stuff is always fluid. But I think this will be very beneficial for us to do this on a monthly basis. So. All right, with that, I believe we are adjourned. So thank you, everyone. You get extra time in your day that not attending a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a good one.